Sports Card Podcast, where we tackle the hobby's hottest topics in depth to help you navigate the sports card landscape and enjoy the hobby we all love. Here's your host, John Newman.
All right, it's time for another episode of Hobby Quick Hits. I'm your host, John Newman. Today's show is about grading. And I know I've done grading shows prior to this. If you know anything about my background, I do a lot in grading. But I never really talked about some of the benefits of it and why it's, to me, it's important to the hobby. And you know, really, honestly, what got me to do this episode was just recently, just some of the hate I see towards grading. And I get it. If you don't like grading, you don't do grading, I get it. I get that aspect of it. I've always been a hobby as you see fit guy. Whatever your niche is, whatever you do, to each their own sort of thing. But what I'm seeing now is people who don't grade really taking some pot shots, and there's some vitriol there. And I don't get that. I don't understand it. What happened to, hey, grading's not my thing? And it's gotten more than that. It's gotten kind of the next level. Like if you grade, you're kind of silly or you're stupid. I've heard someone say, if you grade, you're stupid. I don't know where that comes from. Like, if you don't like grading, I get it. It's not cheap. It's an expensive facet of the hobby that many may avoid just on price alone. But I wanted to do an episode where I just talk about those of us that grade. And there's a lot of us. I'm going to tell you something. Whether you agree with this fact or not, I would say over 50% of people are into grading in some form. And here's what I mean by that. Before you fall out of your chair, what I mean by that is this. Either they are submitters, where they submit raw cards. They're buyers. They'll buy graded cards, whether that's at a show or online. They may not submit, but they'll buy graded cards. Or the other aspect, someone who will sell graded cards. Now, they probably fall into the buy graded cards. To sell them, you got to obtain them somehow. So you either submitting them yourself or buying them graded and reselling them. And I believe that number to be, if every 10 hobbyists, probably 6 or 7 of them are into grading in some form or fashion. And, you can debate me on that, but the number's high. Whatever it is, the number's high. There's probably more people into grading than not into grading. If you go to the National, you see how long that line is for people to submit cards. You know about the backlogs that all the big grading companies have now, millions of cards. So you can't argue. This episode is not to argue the significance of grading to the hobby. If you believe it's not significant, you're fooling yourself. Anything I say, you've already made your mind up. This show is probably not for you. This show is just to talk about, why do people grade? Why is it so popular? We got this vitriol coming, but the vitriol, it's this or it's that, or it's just a money grab, and I believe in, and if you're going to have that debate, let's talk about both sides. Is it expensive? Can you hobby without grading? Yeah, I'm here to tell you, you can hobby without grading, and people do that as well. And that's, to each their own. But let me talk about some of the reasons that grading is popular. And all these reasons I'm about to give, some might do it for those reasons. Some might do it for all of them. Some might do it for one of them. The first thing I'll say is the baseline when it comes to grading. The card gets encapsulated. It's protected, right? It doesn't matter what year the card is. It could be vintage, it could be modern. If it's encapsulated in that plastic slab, if you drop it, the card's at least protected. Could you crack the slab? Could you chip the slab? Sure, you could do that, and obviously you don't want to do that. But the card itself is protected more so than if you put it into even a top loader, a soft sleeve, a binder, and anything like that. And there are people that just grade their cards for that aspect of it. I know people say, hey, I know this card's going to grade a 1 or a 2, obviously on the vintage side of the house. But I want this thing in there, in that slab to protect it. Provenance authentication, right? We see, and it's getting worse. We see fakes, right? People counterfeiting cards. And it's not just vintage cards. It's modern day cards. 2011 update Trout is one of the most fugazied cards in the hobby. That is a modern card. We're seeing it now. Anytime there's money to be made, people are going to fake cards. We're seeing even autograph cards being faked recently. And so grading proves, at least it should, and it probably does in 99.9% of the time, that your item, your card, is the genuine article, right? And I've said on my show, any of my shows, Mike Trout update. I just mentioned that Mike Trout update rookie. It's so faked that honestly, it's hard for me to buy raw Trout rookies anymore. The fakes have gotten better, and they're hard to tell. And kudos to the grading companies who are still able to do that. It's not as easy as you think, and the counterfeiters are getting better at the illegal stuff that they do. Let's talk about value, right? I think that's probably the number one reason that cards get graded. And I can speak to this from personal experience, right? I can't tell you how many $10 to $20 cards that I've submitted, and they come back at 10, and I've resold those, for three figures, right? Obviously the ROI on that is good. And why wouldn't you do that? I always use the example. If you see $80 on the ground, are you going to walk by it, or are you going to pick it up and put it in your pocket? You're going to bend down, pick it up, and put it in your pocket. Everybody would, that I'm aware of anyway. And sort of, grading's sort of like that, at least to me. Like if hey, this $20 card's in really beautiful shape. It's a card that's in demand. Sure, I could sell it for $20, and some people obviously do that. Or I can get this slabbed, enhance its value, and that $20 card's now a $150 card. And maybe even more potential if it's a young player, a rookie, and their performance is indicative to that card even going higher in that graded 10 form. And, the demand is there. We see a lot of people buying 9s right now. And this is not something I do. I don't do this, but I've seen people, people say, well, the difference between a 9 and a 10 is very little or almost non-existent. I'll tell you the truth. I won't argue that. I think there's a lot of truth to that statement, to the point we saw the explosion of graded 9 cards in the year 2020. There wasn't many things that didn't explode in the hobby in the year 2020, but graded 9s for the longest time, I can tell you this from personal experience, would just sit in the box at a card show, right? People just want those PSA Beckett SGC 10s, right? That's it. Anything below that, unless it's vintage, is non-desirable. Well, 2020 changed that equation. 9s blew up almost literally overnight. Why? I think the main reason is people realize, number one, you put a 9 and a 10 next to each other, you'd be hard-pressed to find what the difference is between the two cards. And people started buying 9s for what reasons? To break out of those cases and resubmit them in hopes to upgrading it to a 10. And that became, in a sense, a phenomenon in itself. Another reason, another positive thing why someone may grade is the tracking the registry, the database of the card. It sort of has now, a history. You can go online and see, not only how many of those but how many have been graded, how many have been graded on that level or higher or lower, depending on the grade. And people, listen, whether you like it or not, and I'm not a huge fan of analytics in the hobby. I think there's sometimes too much. We're just oversaturated with it. But for those who like analytics and tracking and, population reports, graded cards provide that. And the last thing, that I can see with graded cards is, I'm a show dealer. And whether you're a show dealer or just someone maybe travels, they just handle better, right? In the slabs, right? They travel better. If you're a show person, whether you're a dealer or you're going to show wheeling and dealing, and you got your shoe box or monster box with your slabs in them, they travel better encapsulated than not, and that's just the fact. Long term, they're going to last longer. They're being blocked from that harmful UV light. How many times you look at cards, right? You want to know what UV light does? Look at some of your top loaders after a while, right? They yellow, your sleeves. Well, it breaks down card fibers too, and it can happen even in an encapsulated card. But that plastic is going to be a buffer and slow that process down and protect the card. And so, I've had, and I think we've all heard someone say, listen, I just like my card encapsulated for protection. I know it's a Mickey Mantle PR1, and it's which still has value, obviously, but I know it's not a PSA 4 that's going to bring $2,000, but I just want that card protected. I want to put it out on display. The slab cards can be displayed to me a lot easier and better. I'm speaking right now in the studio, but right behind my back here, I have a wall of graded cards, about 40 of them on wall stands, and so some people like to display them like that. That encapsulation, again, protects UV light, protects them if they fall. If any of these fall out of my racks behind me, they're probably going to be fine. Hopefully the cases survive the fall as well. So I just want to kind of play lawyer here, put on my suit and tie in defense of graded cards. Not in defense of graded companies, but graded cards and why people grade, why I grade. Some of those reasons are right up my alley when it comes to value, authentication, and demand. And, some people just don't buy raw cards anymore. It's true. We talk about, I don't buy graded cards. This is a two-way street. There are people who just won't touch raw stuff anymore either. I do both. That's me. But there are people that are just exclusively graded now. There's people who say, hey, I'm against grading. I won't ever own a graded card. I won't ever buy a graded card and all that stuff. And they're not wrong. That's not my point of this show. No one is wrong, but the vitriol is what made me say, you know what? Take up the sword for 20 minutes and defend the grading niche. Again, not the companies so much as just the process of grading and why do people like myself and others like grading. And I wanted to go over that. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'd love to hear your feedback. I agree with you, John. You're exactly right. Or, John, you're way off base. And here's why. Either way, that's why we do these shows. That's what's great about the hobbies. We can either agree or agree to disagree. So, with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode of Hobby Quick Hits. We'll see you next Wednesday. I appreciate you listening. Thanks for everything. Remember, Sports Card Nation on Fridays, Hobby Quick Hits on Wednesdays. We'll see you soon. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. They give you the tools that are needed to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And they distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast. It's why I use it and why you should too. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hey folks, thanks for listening to the show. Wanted to give out our social media links where you can follow the show even when you're not listening to it. On Twitter, we are at Hits Hobby, HITSHOBBY. On Instagram, we are at Hobby Quick Hits Podcast, at Hobby Quick Hits Podcast, all one word. Our website is www.sportscardnation.net. Look for the link to Hobby Quick Hits. You'll find us there. And you can always text us on our text line, area code 315-491-0239.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.